Welcome to Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose podcast. Our podcast showcases inspiring appraisers and professionals from the industry who are leaders in their field. How did they get to where they are? What have they learned along the way? What can we learn from them? Your host is real estate investor, entrepreneur, and appraiser, Michael Hobbs.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another informative, engaging, and in this case, this is going to be an exciting episode of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose podcast. I'm your host, Michael Hobbs. I'm excited to have Patrick with us. Patrick, thanks for joining us.
Mike, thanks for having me.
Man, it's a pleasure, buddy. It's a pleasure. Friends, you're going to love this episode for reasons you don't know yet, but when you get into it, Patrick's experience, the different things he's been involved in and what he's up to now really are a wonderful example that there's so much more that can be done out of just the core competencies and core education in and around valuation. But before we get there, got to do what only you can do, which is smash that subscribe button, hit the like button, and definitely add some comments. You're going to find this quite informative, and it'll expand your mind. You'll still fit in the car, but your brain will definitely be stimulated. So Patrick, man, people want to know, were you born this way, or how did you get into the appraisal and or valuation world?
No, it's obviously not born this way, but
Tell me about it.
I got into the business in Dallas, Texas. And Dallas, the culture we had in Dallas was, if you wanted to be like an investment sales, or you want to be a broker or something like that, they didn't want to teach you how to underwrite. They didn't want to teach you how to go through the procedures of mastering kind of property level economics. And they said, go be an appraiser for 18 months. So we always had this culture in Dallas. And I had a professor at the time that he had given like a lot of presentations and white papers and things like that. And this was back in 2006. And he anticipated what was going to happen in the GFC. And he told me, he said, hey, man, do not go work at Countrywide or Nation Star, any of those groups. He's like, go get some human capital. He's like, go learn how to underwrite properties. And the appraisal business, again, I am a member of the Appraisal Institute. It's the best education you get in terms of mastering property level.
Totally agree.
So that's what motivated me to do it. I'm not a full-time appraiser, but I will never give back the years that I did going to Appraisal Institute classes, and then obviously staying involved with the ecosystem, right?
Mm-hmm. So here you are. Were you going to UT, or were you in the Republic of Texas for University World?
So I went to the University of North Texas. So I stuck around DFW. My folks lived in South Lake, so I wanted to stay kind of in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Yeah, totally get that. So you get this opportunity. When you entered college, did you have any sense you were going to be in and around the real estate world, or were you like doing different jobs and hustling around as a teenager in high school, just with no view of the world?
I knew I wanted to get in kind of the business world. And then very similar to, I'm in academia now as a professor of real estate finance, and I have a lot of students that come into my classes as juniors. We always focus, it's changing now, but we've always gone in the world of finance just thinking it's equities and fixed income. Now the world of alternative investments is opening up, right? And I was on the path just to be a finance stooge until I took a real estate course. And there's a gentleman who went, his name's Dr. Bain. He passed away a few years ago, but he's legendary in the state of Texas. And I took his class, and I was just blown away. I was completely inspired by his story, his background. And then once I took his real estate principles class, I focused completely on a real estate major. So again, it's real estate finance. It's the finance. It's the same algebra, just applied to tangible property. So that's what kind of inspired me, was really a professor. And God rest his soul, just a tremendous human being, inspired a lot of lives. And that was it, was just taking one class.
And it's always amazing here on the Perusing's podcast. We have so many interesting and unique firsts. You're clearly our first University of North Texas alum. So congratulations for claiming one of your own distinctions here amongst more than 13 seasons of the podcast. So that's pretty amazing. And what was it that had you go towards valuation as opposed towards, say, brokerage or into the whole origination side of things?
Yeah, again, the professor, again, Dr. Bain, he just told me, he said, this the capital markets are going to blow up. And I wouldn't say he autographed The Big Short. I do have his 5-year forecast, which I think I attended in like 2007. And he talked all about, hey, the secondary mortgage market's going to get crippled by the GFC. And he predicted what was going to happen. My point, though, is he was the one that told me, he said, hey, don't get into a scenario where you go out and get a job. And all my buddies were like those Big Short guys. They were driving around Ferraris and all sorts of things. And then they ended up moving back with their parents. I didn't want that. I didn't want that experience. And I wanted to go out there and develop some human capital. So again, it was a great opportunity, not only to learn property level economics, but to ride out the GFC. And so I was very fortunate to have that type of mentor that advised me to go in the valuation space. And again, listen, whether values are going up or down, somebody needs a valuation, right?
Yes.
So it was a great way to, not so much recession proof, but it was a great way to ride out a very tough time in our business.
And then how did you choose the firm that you went to work with upon graduation? Was that a personal recommendation from your professor or what have you?
A fraternity brother.
Okay, thank goodness for
fraternities.
fraternities.
I won't name who he is, but he's a great guy. I still stay in touch with him. Obviously, I'm in Louisville. It's been like 15, I don't know how many years, but it's been a long time since I lived in Texas. But when I do get back home, definitely give him a ring. But fraternity brother, tremendous, again, another tremendous friend.
So right out of school, you go into a valuation firm. You start getting associated with that. Were you more in a generalist role? Were you more in a specialist role? Were you just a researcher? What was life like for those first couple of years after graduation?
Yeah, so I went in as a researcher, and I just had to go and get my trainee's license. So that took some time, 6 months, to kind of get my classes down. The firm that I work for, and again, I don't like naming names on a podcast, but
it's okay. This is public knowledge. Like, you can go on LinkedIn. You can tell us what's already.
They go on LinkedIn, but the company that I worked for, the house was 50-50, right? So it was mostly commercial, general commercial appraisal work, mostly in Texas. And then on the other side of the house was healthcare real estate. So I had the opportunity to do a lot of master the 4 primary food groups on the general side. So office, multifamily, retail, industrial. And I did quite a bit of that in Texas, quite a bit in that Dallas-Fort Worth. It was an institutional type group, meaning we had Class A assets, which was great. But I did some weird and esoteric stuff like marinas and affordable housing and just different types of things. So I got all that experience on the commercial side or the generalist side. And then I had the opportunity to work on healthcare real estate. So I did a lot of senior housing. I did a lot of healthcare, ambulatory centers.
Yep.
And that was really cool. Obviously, healthcare real estate became pretty relevant to my business down the road or my experience down the road. But yeah, so I got like a niche asset class experience as well.
That's phenomenal. And that's so interesting. I don't know that I recalled that and how that's going to play into what you're going to share later in terms of that, how that is such a view towards the future, having an understanding of what's going on there. So you get this opportunity. How long did you stay in that space and in that role before you made a change?
It was about 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah. And I wanted to, and then I started thinking about graduate school. I started thinking about really the other half of the equation. What I mean by that is, like, I've always looked at my career as the division, right? So again, we talk about finance, valuation, cash flow stream in the numerator, some sort of yield rate, or some sort of risk profile in the denominator.
Yep.
And I learned the property level economics that I wanted to learn. It usually takes about 5,000 hours to master something. And I felt like I got that mastery. And I got through most of the Appraisal Institute curriculum in that 4 years. And I said, I wanted to experience something different. I wanted one more life experience or kind of change my worldview. So I got out of Dallas for a bit and I went all the way to upstate New York to graduate school. And I also wanted kind of exposure to master the denominator, right? So I mastered the numerator, property level economics, how to get down to NOI. And I wanted the experience of how to understand debt and equity and the denominator side of the equation. So the leap to upstate New York, graduate school full-time, and then ultimately heading down to New York City, which is the center of the universe, if you will, obviously the financial capital of the world. So a lot of the properties that I was doing in terms of underwriting, I was doing now on the capital market side. So yeah, that's what kind of motivated me to get back on it. So it was like,
Sure.
I'm completely naked on the denominator. I wanted to learn a little bit more of that.
Yep. No, I can totally appreciate that. In choosing to go upstate New York, they're known as the number one hospitality school in the country, if I'm not mistaken. They are deep in and around the real estate experience. And so did you go in with that intention? Did you choose that because you wanted to further your understanding of real estate and finance?
I explored to other universities.
Mm-hmm.
And this one was interesting because it was a small class. I mean, it was 25 students. But
wow.
I think it was 65% were all international. And
okay.
I got the exposure of being in the classroom with folks from India, Thailand, China, South America, just all over the world. So that again, when I think about like perspective and worldview, just learning how other folks not only approach valuation, but investments or just their life in general, there was that human element that I wanted as well. So I wanted a niche type program. Obviously, I had the intention of getting down to New York City. So I had that experience as well. So obviously being in the state of New York, that kind of helped. And obviously an Ivy League institution helped as well. But no, so it gave me, and they always say Cornell is it's the easiest Ivy to get into. It's the toughest one to graduate from. I really appreciate that because it was 2 years.
I have a number of friends that have gone there. I don't know that I've heard them say that. The easiest to get into and the hardest to get out of.
It's a tough university. And then you're in upstate New York, man. So it's a very cloudy, it's a very gray ecosystem. So I didn't know what seasonal depression was until I was up there.
You're coming from the Dallas metro area and you're up there in upstate New York. Hey, but I assume you got better at what, skiing or snowboarding during the winters? Did you take that up?
I did. And when I finally committed to being up in the Northeast, I said, I got to learn to play in this stuff. Otherwise, the winters are going to be miserable. I am good at skiing. I did have a little bit of a little ski accident in Park City about a month ago. I need to get an MRI on my knee, but that's too much information. But
different story. You and I can share stories on that.
But no, listen, I don't go down double blacks. Groom blues is my speed, but there's nothing better than a ski trip, especially with family and friends. It's the best. So I picked up skiing.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And so here you are, and Cornell, proximity obviously to New York City, Wall Street, all those kind of things. Yeah. Did you have an idea what segment of the market you wanted to get into before you went and got your master's? Or was it get there and then see what opens up for you?
Get up there and see what opens up for me. Again, I don't say I'm being crude or anything like that. It was really just, I did focus on the equation, right? And I was like, I need to learn a little bit more about capital markets. I need to learn a little more about debt and equity. I just wanted to master the division, if you will. So that was kind of my approach to the business. And again, I was 26 years old. I still had mistakes that I was going to make, right? I wasn't married, didn't have kids, right? So it was an opportunity that I can pull a trigger and go get one more life experience. But that was the gap that I was looking to fill. And obviously looking back, it was, I think, the right move.
Totally get you on that. You have this desire to really get into the whole denominator aspect of it. Did you choose debt? Did you choose equity? Did you choose, in this case, capital markets research? What was your next step after your master's?
I touched it all, man. It was, we've closed billions worth of deals. I've been on a lot of failed transactions. I've been on a lot of successful transactions. I've been on transactions that won awards. But I pretty much closed all parts of the capital stack. Obviously, we look at senior debt, could be CMBS, could be balance sheet, preferred equity, mezz debt. I've done joint venture equity. I've done co-GP equity. So I pretty much raised like 98% of the capital stack. So that was, again, it was about 4 or 5 years of really just digging in and understanding capital markets and how to build cap stacks and the mechanics behind all that. So again, it was going up to upstate New York and taking that leap and then moving to New York City. I had no family, no friends in New York. So it was another leap that I had to do, but again, the right move. And now let's think about like 10 years of experience, include graduate school and that. Now I feel like I've mastered the division, right? I've mastered the numerator, I've mastered the denominator. And that's exactly what I wanted to achieve my first decade in the business, if you will.
Man, that's phenomenal. the whole conversation around experiencing, I think, as you phrase it as 98% of the capital stack, that's for people that deal with institutional grade real estate, they know exactly what you're talking about. But for a lot of people in and around the valuation and or appraisal profession, they like that just probably went right over their head at a very, I would say, college level, not high school, but not MBA program. Can I just give a high level understanding of what, when you say capital stack, it's a lot more than just debt?
It's a lot more than just debt. And we just break it up. We'll get to the 98, but let's just call it like a 60 to 65% senior debt piece.
Yep.
And then you throw like another, I don't know, another 30% could be some joint venture equity. So especially at the institutional level, you could be talking about tens of millions of dollars. And you have a lot of developers and a lot of folks in the industry that don't have that type of capital, right? So you go out and raise a joint venture partner. So that could be like a 90-10 type deal, but it's 90-10 on that, call it 40%, right? So now we're raising, what, $36? So the 36 on top of the 60. So now we're at that 96. And then maybe inside that GP, the last 4%, maybe he has some additional cash he needs, or he's balance sheet strapped, can't sign for the guarantees. So he brings in a co-GP partner, which is typically 50-50. And now we're like, now there's that $2, right? So now we're at that 98%.
Yep. Yeah, it's fascinating. Most people don't realize, especially depending on what level of the complexity of property they're dealing with, most of them are just like, there's debt and there's equity. I'm like, oh, there's so much more than that. And there can be so many little hands at the table sitting inside of one segment of the capital stack or another. And then, of course, all the documents that go behind it and support that.
And then when you get to New York, and I say this, it's not a nod to New York City, but
I get that.
The things that we did there, it's a whole nother stratosphere, man. And the capital markets there are so deep and so sophisticated. When you get there and you experience it, it really is light years ahead of really anywhere else in the world. And I didn't work in London or Tokyo, but New York was just a whole nother level.
I'm not saying that you didn't do this, but you might feel like, wow, my name's Patrick and I'm good looking and I'm going to be in Hollywood. So you're not going to stay in New York City. You're going to go to LA and you're like, my name is Patrick and I think I'm going to go to Nashville because I'm going to be a country music singer or whatever it is. There's different, you're like, hey, I am in medical technology and in life-saving treatments. Hey, I'm going to Boston. Like you just move around to different parts of the country where there's high concentrations historically for particular disciplines or domains. And obviously New York, amongst many, is definitely capital markets.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And so what was, for people that you're thinking, okay, maybe I did do an MBA or maybe I didn't, what type of role did you take when you went to New York City to get into capital markets? Did you join one of the big financial or banking firms to just join their capital markets department, or did you go to a specialty? Because these kind of paths help people think for themselves what might be available for them in the future.
I went to a boutique shop.
Got it.
It wasn't one of the larger ones. And that was, again, I wouldn't say by design.
Yep.
There was an attraction of what they were doing. And when you get into like a boutique shop, you're very hands-on. And we had rules where you couldn't have any templates. Like you had to get a blank workbook and you had to frame up a capital market or a waterfall or a draw schedule or something along those lines. Like you had to be very agile. Because if you get into those large shops, it's standardized templates. They lock worksheets, they lock cells. Like you can't be very innovative, and you get spoon fed with a crystal spoon. You know what I mean? Like that's not learning it. So I knew I wanted to be inside a boutique shop where I really had to roll up my sleeves and really master this stuff. And when you get into my real estate finance class, my students, they spend more time in Excel than they have their entire life. And when we get into the nitty gritty of framing up cap stacks, draw schedules, and waterfalls, I do it with them. I literally bring up a blank workbook and we work it all together. And again, that was something that I wanted to approach. And yes, it was difficult because you have to learn on the fly. And when you get into that ecosystem, it's a very hyper competitive environment. And if you can't learn, you get weeded out. And that's New York City for you. that was on purpose. I wanted to be in a boutique type environment where I learned everything, where you give me a blank workbook, Mike, I can frame it up.
And I think I was just having this conversation with someone earlier this week, and it underscores what you're speaking to. And that is, they're like, oh yeah, and AI this and that. And I said, that's fantastic if you actually know that the results that are produced in lightning speed are correct and you can validate it, but not because it said so. And this is another conversation. Part of someone in that conversation was a senior attorney, a partner at a firm, and they were sharing about the challenge and the frustration of I can get 80% of what I want done in ChatGPT and not give it to a certain level of associate in the firm. And it's good for me and my output. And it's not necessarily great for my billing, but it's great for the client. And yet it's hollowing out the middle of the firm because they don't get to work, as I heard you say, Patrick, your students have to learn, like they're not pulling out an Argus. They're not pulling out a pre-planned output and just plugging numbers in. You literally got to build it. You have to have the thinking capacity, the cognitive capability to produce the result. That's really inspiring.
You touched on a lot of things, Mike, and I just want to reply because we're probably going to get into the AI conversation.
Oh, I'm sure we're getting there. We're just not there yet.
And again, you talk about removing, this new technology is fantastic, right? You can't remove the human element and the expertise associated with that. And yes, attorney's a great example because your billing's going down, which is never good, right? But exposure that your associate, the kid fresh out of law school, and the hours and the mastery and the grinding that he does doing that, at some point he's going to be that expert. And if you hollow that out, that's a problem, man. That's a real serious problem. I think where this AI thing is going is, I think we're over the allure of it and the speed, and now it boils down to trust, right?
Yes.
And I love how you use 80% because my analogy is like I can drive down the field much faster with AI, but when I get into the red zone, I want the expertise. I want somebody that has 50 years in the business that's going to tell me, I went through this, I failed at that, I was an expert at this happened to me in the 1980s, and this is the decision that you should do. I want that. No technology can ever give me that. And again, I talk to students all the time, and they're like, just let ChatGPT tell me what to do. I was like, okay, when you get in front of another human being and they ask you certain questions, critical questions, you're not going to have your computer in front of you. So how do you answer it? Do you know the material? Do you know the investment decision that you're recommending? Because you can't rely on the technology.
Yes.
So anyway,
No, I think that's fascinating. I appreciate you touching on that, because then you have this experience that you shared, getting to go to the capital markets in New York. You're at this boutique shop. How long did you stay there before your next opportunity opened up?
I was there for about 7 years, seven or 8 years. And I got in there so I finished, my graduate studies started in 2010, I finished in 2012. And if you recall that time period, the GFC, and then it was a little bit of chaos, right? And then we had
a lot of chaos back in 2012.
Chaos during that time. My point though is I came out right when the cycle started, right? And so it was a great opportunity to really just work on so many different transactions, so many successes in terms of closings, but also just some failures too. And there's a lot of deals that we try to approach that we failed on, and it is what it is. We still close billions worth of deals. But I spent a lot of time doing that, and then I got to a point too where I wanted something a little bit different. And then all of a sudden, we had the COVID situation and stuff like that, and the markets were getting frothy right before COVID happened. So if you recall 2018, 2019, there was a lot of things that were happening at the Federal Reserve level, and quantitative easing. I think we were on our third round of that. So the markets were getting a little bit choppy then, and then all of a sudden COVID happened. And I got married at the time. We had
Your marriage caused COVID?
No.
Oh my gosh.
There's less disasters that we're responsible for, but that was my point though, is I'm framing up now how I'm in Louisville. And we got pushed out of New York because of the pandemic. Very similar story to a lot of people that left New York during that time. We had a 5-month-old when the pandemic hit, and we ultimately transitioned down to Louisville. But we still have a relationship with New York. I got 2 more graduate degrees from Cornell. So I got 3 graduate degrees, which is just way overeducated. And then we can segueing into some of the stuff that we were doing from an applied research standpoint.
Yeah.
It started turning into the business I have now, right?
Yeah. And Patrick, I think the interesting thing is you touched on is you got this opportunity to join a boutique firm because you chose a smaller firm versus a larger firm. Yeah. You got exposed to so many more opportunities, and both in size and scale, as well as what if you were at a larger firm, you probably would have been more pigeonholed and had to move along at a certain level of progression, or a bit more of the institutional, oh, I've been here this long and now I can be that. And in contrast, you get this amazing experience throughout the whole capital stack. Was it all domestic, or were you doing international or global work at that time?
We looked at a few opportunities like in the Caribbean. You get into the Caribbean, it's Dutch money, it's French money, it's British money. Mm-hmm. But we never did anything that was like overseas. Nothing to that scale. It was mostly domestic.
Yeah, totally appreciate that. And were you all originating for your own account, or were you all always of counsel or of engagement for others that were actually needed your services to fulfill the rest of their project, to bring it to?
We were a third party. So the client would hire us to go out there and raise capital on their behalf.
Yep, totally makes sense. And so you mentioned getting pushed out of New York. A lot of people did. You end up in what's known as the bourbon capital of the world. How'd you choose Louisville of all places?
I married into Louisville, which is kind of a traditional story. But my wife she was in fashion. Again, we had a 5-month-old when the pandemic hit, and we ultimately decided we got to make a move. Like we can't do this anymore. And so we either go back to Dallas or come to Louisville. We have a very when we started having kids, like it's important to me that we have like a village, and that village is aunts, uncles, cousins. We don't want our kids learning from social media and stuff like that. We want to learn from their family, right? So my wife's got a very big village here. So that's what kind of motivated us to come to Louisville. Obviously a lot different than Dallas and New York, but it's, post-COVID, I'm still in this virtual world. I mentioned earlier before we got on the recording that we raised capital out of the Middle East, the UAE. And I still think that when you spend time in New York, like anything's possible. So I'm in Louisville physically, but I'd say the work and stuff that I do is it's global. We talk to people all over the world. But Louisville's a great place, man. There's a lot of smart people here.
Yep.
We got married here, and 80% of our guest list was from outside Louisville. And people came here and had an absolute blast. Like, this place is like a diamond in the rough. And then, of course, we're known for the Kentucky Derby. And when folks come in, it's a foodie town. It's Bourbon Trail we're not yet at the same level of numbers, but I'd say in terms of magnitude and growth, it's very similar to like the Napa Valley, like wine country. So people flying from all over the world to do the Bourbon Trail. So
yes, they do.
There's some world-class things here. We just don't. We just have a really bad job of marketing it. But
so true. That is so true, and I can appreciate that because you get this opportunity. Totally makes sense. Do what's right for the family. Brings you to Louisville. Were you still connected to the capital markets, or was that kind of uproot and start over when you get to Louisville?
No. So I took an opportunity in Indianapolis, and I worked for a gentleman who, interestingly, knew some of the same relationships I had up in New York. It was the capital markets role, and we worked on a few different opportunities. We closed the big one, but that was right about the same time when the Fed started raising rates in 2022. So I was getting in that capital markets role. This time, not working as for a fee, if you will, but more working for kind of a personal balance sheet or a company balance sheet. So that was a little bit different. And I never worked for a developer, so seeing the development side of the business was interesting as well. So I was segued into kind of working for an owner operator. And I did that for about 18 months. And then I'm 41, so I eventually started saying, you know what, it's time to be an entrepreneur. It's time to go explore a few different businesses for myself. And then I had an opportunity to join the University of Louisville full time. So my Tuesday, Thursday is my full-time role. I run the real estate program, and we're looking to elevate that. We're turning from a minor to a major. We're looking to endow a center at some point. So my exposure on the academic side is a lot of fun too, because it's it kind of hones in, it keeps me an expert. It's a good branding thing. But it's also awesome to connect students to industry and to inspire the next generation, because I wouldn't have gotten into the business if a professor didn't inspire me to get into the business. So a lot of the things that Dr. Bain told me, I bring a lot of that energy. I bring a lot of that. I want to inspire that next generation, and I have the opportunity to do that. Yeah, I have some side businesses and things like that. But the things that I do for the university, the local university, is pretty exciting too.
I love that. So you're a professor of real estate at the University of Louisville. And then when did you, like you said, you've got this notion of moving, you'd been in development. You could have gone into, at this point, the components of the numerator, the components of the denominator. What did you choose to focus on?
So we can get into the technology stuff that I'm working on, because that really what inspired me to get into academia was, because again, my exposure, the story of Crinetics, which we'll get into. I'm happy to name names for that, but
of course I get that.
That's our tech business.
That's your farm. We're going to talk about that one.
That's our tech business that was born out of 2 years of applied research at a university in New Jersey. I won't name them, and we did it with two of the world's largest data providers. And a lot of it was with the motivation of getting into academia was because it's very difficult to get data in our business. And when you don't have data and when you don't have data, you can't run a proof of concept. You can't run a scientific method if you don't have information and data. And I said, okay, pause for a second, but the reflection of my career and my story was really how Crinetics was born, and just that framework. And when I say the space market and the transaction market, I think about the space market as just mastering property level economics inside the numerator. I mastered that, and then I said, okay, I want to master the denominator, and I see debt and equity kind of chasing the space market, right? And that's inside the transaction market. My point, though, is like my career spawned into watching these two markets that are truly interconnected, but aren't interconnected in the actual industry. They're very bifurcated. So that's what spawned me to get inside academia. And that's when I started pitching this concept really in the beginning of 2021. So we were making the transition down to Louisville. I had this idea and this concept that I wanted to go actually prove it out inside of an applied research setting. And I started pitching it to a lot of institutions, a lot of Center for Real Estate. You know who they are. And that's when I engaged with a university out of New Jersey. And that's when we started kicking the tires, doing the academic stuff, and then spent most of 2024 securing the IP. And then this last year, really in product development. Now we've gone from a team of 3 of an academic team to 7. And we have a couple guys that are ex-Oracle. We have somebody who works for a publicly funded space agency. We got some really smart people on our team, and a lot of folks are more on the IT and data science side as opposed to the real estate. So I'd say the culmination of my career, both Dallas, New York, coming back to Louisville, the academic exposure has really spawned in kind of probably the back half of my career, which is real estate technology in the AI world.
Yeah, totally get that. And would you say, as someone just listening, just really taking in what you've shared with us so far, Patrick, is that because you both made the change and had an opportunity to join the university, that essentially gave you some literal space to have some time to think about what you want to do, because you had some continuity of employment and income, as opposed to I showed up in Louisville and I had a cup in my hand and I'm out there like hustling to put something together. I'm hearing that you had a little bit of perspective that was available that wasn't completely pressure because I got to put food on the table.
80% of all businesses fail within 5 years, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. With so many roles and responsibilities that must be managed and have nothing to do with appraisal reports, is it any surprise that it's hard to keep up, much less having a sense of peace, stability, and profitability that comes from growing your business? Given all of this, you might already be thinking about exiting your business one day. Don't miss the limited opportunity to work with Michael, a real estate expert and professional coach. He has worked with more than 300 owners and entrepreneurs to find their highest and best use by solving problems that reach their most important goals. Compress decades of learning into days by working with Michael. Michael is famous in real estate and business coaching. With his help, you can accelerate your growth, increase your quality of life, and earn more money, all while ultimately doing less. Michael helps you not just grow your business, but also find new purpose in it and in your life. If you're ready to take control instead of being controlled, contact him on LinkedIn or email him at michaelh@paru.com.
Well, I mean, there's part of it. There's part of that. Again, my full-time role is at the University of Louisville. So as we're recording this, let's not confuse that. But
no, I understand.
No, but also too, when you get inside that mind state of, especially if you want to create a technology or you want to disrupt an industry. When we talk about commercial real estate, that's 30 trillion in the States, that's 90 trillion around the world. That's a big industry to disrupt. You have to tell a story that turns heads, and you have to tell a story that there's proof of concept behind this if you want to be a true disruptor. And that's exactly what Crinetics is. We are a true disruptor to the industry, and we're providing predictive intelligence that's 5 times better than the industry. Now, if you're going to get on the other side of the table and prove that to somebody, which again, this story is taking us around the world, you got to be in a research type ecosystem. And when you get inside of a tier 1 university, it's just a different mentality. It's different ways of thinking. It's different ways of approaching. People are out there publishing papers. People are always, you're pushing the edge of, all right, I'm going to prove that this is accurate. This is correct. So my point though is you get out of the inertia of the transaction environment, whether you're in capital markets or if you're an appraiser, you're running on a treadmill, man. Like my point though is when you exit that treadmill and have the ability to stop and think and start thinking about how the industry can get better. And now you're infused with this incredible technology of AI. So the universe just put me in this situation, man. And
amazing.
Yeah, to your point, yes, it's nice having continuity. It's nice having a paycheck, all those other things. But you're also, I took a pay cut to get into academia. Let's not get confused from that.
Are you telling me that Louisville doesn't have the same pay scale that New York City does?
I'm not saying that on a recording, man.
I will. I'm from there. I'll totally say that.
Yeah, you're in academia. People are there for different perspectives, and you're not making a New York investment banking salary. This is different. Of course. But again, there's opportunity costs, and some of the opportunity costs that I absorbed was now I have a story that I can tell the world. And as we start bringing on clients and things like that, we're talking to groups that have $250 billion portfolios, and we're turning heads. It's very exciting to get on a call with people that have been in the industry for 40 years and say, hey, you guys really got something here. And we have folks on our slide deck that says, hey, you guys have a gold mine. And we know that. And when I say it's a story that's taken us around the world, we've pitched it to Europe, South America. And as I mentioned earlier, we have some wealthy folks out of the Middle East that want to capitalize. So we're excited about all those things, man.
I love that. And obviously, so many of our listeners are data driven. You threw out an early statistic there that said, hey, we perform at 5 times, not 5%, not 50%, but literally 5 times what otherwise was capable. Yeah. What was capable? And then how do you get to a measurement of 5 times superior from a predictive intelligence standpoint?
Yeah. So let's talk about our industry, right? And going back to the space market and the transaction market. And this is a valuation-based podcast. The inefficiencies of our business, right? Again, I'm a member of the Appraisal Institute, so I'm a homer here. But when you think about our business and you flip open to the sales comparison approach inside of commercial appraisal, we're dealing with 4 or 5, maybe 6 trades that are heterogeneous at best. And we make subjective assumptions. They are subjective. Yeah, we can do paired sales and things like that. And then we make quantitative adjustments to come up with value that's only good for one day.
Absolutely.
A very prehistoric way of doing valuation. But when you think about 4 or 5 trades, you can't get statistical with 4 or 5 trades. Central limit theorem, you need at least 30 variables. So our industry is always confined to just for some reason, it's just the transaction market, and we're missing a whole nother bucket of data. And when you think about that bucket of data, that's when you get inside the space market. That's when you get inside all these different variables that ultimately provide a leading indicator of what's eventually going to happen in the transaction market. So that was the framework of the research and what we had started attacking. My point, though, is now we can get statistical. So when you get statistical, you can start measuring equations, and you start measuring, when you start back testing and things like that, you start measuring that goodness of fit, the quality of your equation via an R squared. right? So that R squared is your goodness of fit. And I don't want to get into all the different R squareds, and we get into statistics. It gets very technical, right?
Yes.
But we have use cases that show inside a vacuum, if you're just dealing with the transaction market, right? You're getting R squareds that are 20% or less. Inside our technology, inside of our architecture, and combining kind of our secret sauce, you're getting to R squareds that are 90% plus. So obviously 5 times. So you're getting,
absolutely.
And obviously 20 times 5 is 100%, but we have R squareds that are like in that 15% plus minus, right?
Yep.
So yeah, if you're getting R squareds that are 90% plus, now you're dealing with, okay, now that's providing predictive intelligence that's thoroughly back tested, that's allowing me, when you get into certain equations, right? It's allowing me to forecast 5 times better than what I can do inside the transaction market.
Which, in and of itself, many would say is a holy grail, especially for those who have large amounts of assets under management or considering making large investments. So, given that you've been building this firm, what did it take for you from when you had the idea to getting started to where you're at now? What have been 1 or 2 of the major steps, iterations, and challenges that you've overcome? Because I would agree with you that the ability today for someone to come in, have a core understanding like you gained through education, and then use AI to get there faster is more available now than it ever has been. But nonetheless, there's some very important learnings along the way.
Oh man, and I'm not trying to be boastful. We're going to write a book about this at some point. Let's scale this thing and let's IPO it. Let's be successful here. We got a long way to go. But when you go back to where the story started of just an idea, and that idea turned into a pitch deck, and that pitch deck, I pitched it to all these different universities and they all said no. And I finally struck gold with one. And then one became me pitching it to all these different data partners, the data aggregators, we like to call them. And that turned, I won't name them, that turned into me bringing those 2 to the table to where we finally inked and dried 2 data providers to start this research. And that took about a year to do. And it almost fell apart multiple times. And then all of a sudden we're doing the research, we discovered some really cool stuff. And then we had to secure the IP. And if you're familiar with universities, they're very ruthless with their IP, man. So that was about a 7-month negotiation, right? And then we finally got on the other side of that. But that story started really in 2021 when I actually really started putting this idea on paper. But I had that idea in 2018, 2019. So the idea incubated, and then I said, I'm going to take some action to this. And then when we started the research, we didn't really get the data pulls until fall of 2022. So it took us fall of 2021 to really start having negotiations with data partners, and then securing that in fall of 2022. And then it took us another 2 years to do the research to prove it out. And then we had another negotiation for the IP. So now we're 5 years into this thing, and it almost fell apart multiple times. And now a team of 3 guys on the academic side that started off with just an idea are now we have a team of 7. We have a couple guys that are ex-Oracle, guys that have done deals with Larry Ellison. We're pitching this to pension funds that are a $250 billion. We have NDAs out the wazoo. My point, though, is like to go from an idea to where we are now, and we still got a long way to go. Let's not be, but we're still in our seed phase, if you will. But just to get to where we are now, there's so much conviction that you had to have. And there's so much. That's what it's all about, man. Is do you have the conviction in an idea? Nobody. It's just conviction, man. You wake up every day knowing something that somebody else does, and when 1,000 people tell you no, do you keep going? And
do you keep going?
I just kept going, man. I just knew that what we were doing was correct, and now we're on the other side of it, and it's just really exciting. When you talk about those guys, and I look at not much Steve Jobs, I think it was Bill Gates, where he's like sitting there on his computer. He's got the Microsoft banner up there, and he's in his garage. And now I have so much like I pull it up, and I have a photo of my logo. It's the Crinetics logo, and so you can't see it. It's above my computer here. But I put that up in like fall of 2021. So I knew the logo, I knew the company name, like I knew everything that we were going to go and do back in 2021. So I had conviction from the very beginning, and that's what it's about. And United States of America, we got some challenges, but this is a country where you can take an idea and run with it. And yeah, so I just say, Mike, it's not a couple things. It's, do you have the conviction and the belief in what you're doing, but you have the conviction and belief in yourself? Because people aren't, it ain't going to be a bunch of yeses, man. It's going to be a hell of a lot of no's, and you just got to keep up and keep going, man.
Yeah, I love that. That's a beautiful thing about it. From the standpoint of, you have this vision before we even got to 2020. Obviously didn't know the world was going to do what it did in 2020. Crinetics, you get this research opportunity, you get this professorship to step in, and that gives you the community that you need to really start building this vision, getting to where you're at now. Use the terms predictive intelligence, predictive analytics, if you will, predictive approach, something most people are not accustomed to. Share with us, if you will, as practitioners, not as lay people necessarily, but how can that evolve the whole industry?
Yeah. And again, this is a valuation type podcast. We are talking to the C-suite at the Appraisal Institute. We've had discussions with them. There's just the tremendous folks, but you get caught in the bureaucracy, not just the appraisers. There's other organizations where there's just a lot of bureaucracy. So it takes a little while for us as a disruptor to start shaking things up, but we are approaching it the correct way. Meaning, we talked about this before we got on the recording. The problem with AI or like a chat GPT is it's a black box. I can never take a black box in front of a judge. I can never, a black box is never going to be USPAP compliant. And so we did not begin our technology creating a black box. We wanted to create something that all the data, all the statistics, all the math you can export, right? And what we want to do with a lot of these different organizations is create things that are compliant with their business. And definitely from the appraisal perspective is, let's create AI tools that are USPAP compliant. Yeah, I've pitched that to multiple different chapters, and that makes sense to everybody. We got a long way to go to really disrupt this part of the ecosystem, but we're approaching it the correct way. And then when you think about like how we're taking this technology, yes, we have our own platform, but we're also talking to groups where you know who they are. If I wanted to create a discounted cash flow analysis, who's the one group I go to? And we would love to have kind of our forecasting capabilities, which is actually some of our architecture is based off of the 6 steps of market analysis. It's things that everybody has done when they're written their demo report. So it's all familiar, right? But how do I take that FMA and calibrate it into some sort of mathematical equation, if you will, that provides a forecast for my discounted cash flow analysis? We know that relationship exists, but nobody's ever taken that math and provided a tool that does it, right? So my point though is back to the application is, let's team up with the group that's the gold standard or the monopoly of providing a discounted cash flow analysis. So instead of just saying, hey, let's assume rents grow 3% in perpetuity, let's actually use a tool that's based off a true like FMA architecture, and let's have a plugin, all right, in that tool where it's like, hey, here's Crinetics forecast. And that Crinetics forecast is back tested at an R squared that's 5 times better than the industry standard, right?
Absolutely.
So it's real-time practical applications that we're providing. And we're not just, we don't want to be like the Palantir. We're like, hey, this is mysterious. It sounds like it works, but we even know if it works.
Exactly.
Not the Palantir, but so that's how we're approaching the industry. We're approaching it with a lot of practicality.
No, I definitely appreciate that. And you made early reference to the difference between the transaction market and the space market, and those attributes that are like known, like transaction details, as opposed to things that may be influencing the space market or even could be influencing the transaction market, but they're not readily available, or you have to analyze them at such scale that it's challenging to really get a grasp on it and draw a credible conclusion. And as you shared, it's about data in aggregate and that ability to analyze it. I think it'd be fascinating, because it's something I find really interesting. Not everyone, dude, it's a little too geeky for me. But what might be some examples of some of these non-traditional variables that, analyzed at scale, are influencing transactions and or pricing, value, etc., performance? Share a few of those.
Yeah. let me just define what the space market is. Again, most of the folks know what this is, but so space market, owners, tenants, and customers go to conduct transaction activities, right? So if Mike wants to go grocery shopping, Patrick wants to get a haircut, usually takes place in some form of tangible property, right? So there's business economic activities that eventually get monetized into tangible property, right? We use this example before we got on the recording, but if I'm looking at a retail investment or I'm appraising a retail center or something like that, I'm looking at certain demographics, I'm certain at retail sales, I'm looking at certain economic indicators that are outside the property, not so much the rent roll. And one of the space market variables that we looked at during the research was crime rates. And obviously, if there's a spike in crime, violent crime, it's eventually going to have a negative impact on the space market via rents, via values. So we know that space market data point is eventually going to have an adverse impact on the transaction market, an adverse impact on the rental market. So I mentioned just retail, but obviously housing, I don't want to live in a violent neighborhood. So it's going to ultimately have an impact on housing values, rental rates, et cetera. One of the things that we also focused on, and this is something I always give in the presentation, but this happened, we did this research during the time of COVID. And the best example I always like to give, and I'll pull out a few metrics, and these are hypothetical metrics. But when we started talking about the office market, we know now that there was a fundamental shift in demand in the office market. And obviously you're seeing a lot of foreclosures, a lot of private equity companies just handing back the keys. But when you think about the space market, right? We knew the space market was chirping back in 2021, 2022. We knew, and if I look at a metric of like office space per worker, right? If I just use that square footage, and let's just say hypothetically that there's 200 square feet of office space per worker, of fundamental demand across the office ecosystem on average, right? Now COVID happens. Well, what happened with COVID? Now we have hoteling. Now we have work from home. Now we have some back offices have been completely remote, right? Now that fundamental demand of office space per worker post-COVID has shifted down, right? And there's studies, let's just say 200. Let's say it just shifts down 10 square feet, right? Depending on market, whatever. But if that shifts down 10 square feet and you extrapolate that across the entire office ecosystem, that's a massive shift in demand. What has supply done? Supply has stayed static. But obviously that relationship, what's going to have an impact on? It's going to have an impact on rents and values. But we saw that monetizing in 2021 and 2022. The space market was chirping, that fundamental demand was shifting down. And then what started happening in 2023 and 2024? You had the Blackstones and the BlackRocks start handing back the keys in office buildings. It started getting priced into the transaction market a couple years later. So again, I think that kind of captures it, where we knew that was monetizing in the space market, and we knew that it was eventually going to lead towards a negative shift in transaction values, and that's exactly what happened.
No, that's completely makes sense. Those predictive indicators. And,
what you say too, Mike, and we pitch this thing like 15 times a week, and we pitch it to gentlemen like yourself that are experienced, that are business owners, that are managing directors and up, and they know it's real. They know this exists. So it makes sense. It's very logical.
It's no different than when you would see when the data first started coming out and people were talking about, oh my gosh, look at the number of U-Haul rentals, like origination to destination. And they were one-way trips, not two-way. And it's like, oh my God, where are they coming from? Tend to be northern states coming to southern states, the Sun Belt move, like those type of things. Like, that's the chirping you're talking about. And it's moving away from, it feels to, I think, or I saw something, and because of, as you talked about, taking the time and gaining access to and harnessing significant amount of data and ongoingly keeping that fresh, that you can start to glean specific, measurable, and count onable results that people, as they say, can take to the bank.
100%. And Mike, you're going to come on these pitches, man. You nailed it for us. That's exactly it.
It is. I love this kind of stuff. It comes to me, I was an investor first. That's what's so unusual. Unfortunately, I find in this industry is people don't go into investing first and then get into valuation and then continue on in investing. I want more people to actually use what they've learned to enrich themselves and build wealth. There is a huge unlock available You just have to go a little bit outside of maybe your comfort zone, and you are the best one to do it. You're not necessarily going to go do what Patrick did. That's just the next level opportunities. That's like West Coast, go launch the next Facebook kind of thing. But more power to them that you are thoughtful enough to come and share with us what next level valuation can look like because of looking at what previously was non-accessible data or not easily derived conclusions from data. And more importantly, as you touch on, everybody's always known, depending on how good your transaction data is, there's a lot of hope and a prayer on the conclusion. There was only 6 transactions. I'm like, none of them are close, and we're going to draw a conclusion anyway.
And that's ultimately, and again, just going back to, I'm a huge believer of just, I can use AI to drive the field faster, but I still need that human element inside the red zone, punching in the end zone. And that'll always, in my opinion, that'll always stay true. So we're not trying to attack the industry where it's like, I'm not a trader anymore. But we can make the industry smarter. We can do it together. I mean, there's a way that we can do this and still keep the human element and still keep that expertise and make the business more efficient. And I'd also say too that some of the things that we're thinking about, and if you just back up completely, if you can take an industry that's highly subjective, yes, we do math, I get it, but we are subjective. We are very subjective, and move it to an objective viewpoint. Now we're moving it from subjective, non-statistical to one that's objective and statistical. And it's a $90 trillion industry worldwide. Think about the value creation that you can just create with that. And so that's where we're going. Is everything I'm telling you is it's just logical. It just makes a lot of sense.
Completely agree. Given all of that, Patrick, and obviously we could feel your passion about this, and there's a handful of things that you did acknowledge that you can't talk about right now because you're at such an interesting time, and there is so much interest. And I think you said NDAs out the wazoo. If not, it sounded like you said NDAs out the wazoo. So congratulations. What are you optimistic or looking forward to over the next 3 to 5 years? Because that's going to be transformative in the world of Crinetics.
Yeah. So again, I told the story. So 2021 to 2025. Now we're in 2026. Now we're onboarding beta customers. Like we're bringing on. Now this is getting a little bit more real. And it's always been real. Now it's getting into turning this into revenue and turning this into a business that we can scale. And now we have, again, I'm not naming names, but we have a team. We haven't closed yet. Money's not in the bank, but we're pretty confident that everything's going to go in the correct direction. And we'll be capitalized by a very lucrative group that is aggressive. And what I mean by aggressive, it's when you get into, there's a lot of companies out there that are claiming to be AI native, and they're just bragging it out to ChatGPT, or there's some sort of, I forget the name of the term, but they don't have true AI infrastructure. And I'd say the companies that are in the US, ChatGPT, Sam Altman, God bless him, the Microsofts, the large scale companies that have the ability to spend billions of dollars to become AI native, that's what it takes. And not saying that we're getting $1 billion investment here, but we are talking to a company that spends almost $50 million a month on their large language model. They are building true native AI infrastructure. And when you have that type of capital and folks that are that aggressive, it's very nice to partner up with them, and we can piggyback or just build our infrastructure with them. And now we can be, what I like to say, and there's plenty of other companies that we talk to that we want to partner with. So again, we love everybody that's being innovative, but we like to say that we're going to be the first true native AI real estate technology company, because we are working with a company that is building infrastructure from the ground up. And that's what it's going to take, is a lot of companies that are just using ChatGPT if ChatGPT boots you off, your business is over.
You're done.
That was never our goal. We always wanted to build true infrastructure. And the group that we're talking to now that we have the green light from, we're excited to kind of move that forward. So that's a big part of it. Obviously getting real large scale customers. I'm not going to name them, but $40 billion pension funds, man. So getting that type of clientele, and then getting the type of capital that we need to be a true global platform. We're just coming in stealth mode. I'm talking about our seed raise, for crying out loud. So our seed raise has taken us from that type of clientele and to a global platform. Really exciting.
Yep.
I'd say the next 3 to 5 years is let's keep scaling this up. Let's keep building. Here's things in the States. We want to build something bespoke in the Middle East. And then we want to scale this across Europe and South America. Oh, yeah. But really what we want to do, and over time, we'd love to be the Bloomberg terminal for private real estate. We know taking kind of our technology to Wall Street brings a lot more liquidity. It brings a lot more. There's a lot of things about tokenization. There's a lot of things about creating liquidity in our space.
Sure.
We know that bringing our technology to Wall Street, we have the ability to pull out different derivative instruments, different ways on creating liquidity and closing the gap between transactions, really pricing intrinsic value. Yep. So the ultimate goal of what we want to do is take this thing to Wall Street. So hopefully we can achieve that in the next 3 to 5 years.
I love that transformative perspective. That is absolutely fantastic. And I know, I know this because I see all the data, but there are a few people that may be very interested because of the high level that you're operating at, because of what they're doing, and they're in the pipeline to get to the podcast. They haven't gotten here yet, so I can't name them. But if they wanted to reach out to you, how do people get in touch with you there, Patrick? Whether it's because of data or maybe some of there, because there's some very wealthy people that started out in valuation. Maybe they don't have $250 billion, but nonetheless, they like the seed round idea. How do they reach you?
Yeah, so Patrick@Crenetics.com, right?
Yep.
I assume we're going to put this on LinkedIn or some sort of YouTube.
Oh yeah, you're gonna. Oh, yeah. This gets a lot of travel. This gets a lot of eyeballs.
Yeah, and we can throw this in another bucket. We talked about conviction.
Yes.
I'm always a believer too. Always take the meeting. Always take the call. You never know. And
you never know.
You never know. And it's it's crazy just how small the world is.
That's
so
true.
My point though is I will always take a call. If anybody sees this, I'm always happy to chat. You just never know.
That's true. It's absolutely true. I completely agree with you on that. Friends, as I told you, I knew it was going to be a fast hour, and holy cow, you have gotten a PhD education here in just 60 minutes. This was almost like AI enabled, if I didn't know better, but it was Michael and Patrick live. So congratulations. That was amazing. Patrick, thank you so much for joining us and sharing all this phenomenal accomplishments that you've done in the short, really 20 years you've been in the workspace.
I appreciate that. Mike, thanks for having me on the show. I really enjoyed it.
It's a pleasure, man. It's a pleasure. Friends, make sure to blow up the chat. And of course, reach out to Patrick and follow Crenetics. It is really impressive what they're doing. It really is creating a future for the valuation industry that very few people have talked about or are creating. And Patrick's doing it from a user perspective, a practitioner perspective, not from someone else who's trying to basically pound the industry into oblivion. So that's also very encouraging. So Patrick, again, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mike.
Appreciate it, buddy.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Appraisers, Appraisers on Purpose. We hope you enjoyed learning from the amazing professional paths and achievements of our beloved guests. Before we go, please subscribe on your listening channel, Spotify, LinkedIn, YouTube, and other podcast channels to hear more from appraisers and valuers regarding their life and their work. After you drop a comment below, who is one friend and peer you can generously share this episode with? If you have any suggestions or questions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Just send us a message on LinkedIn and we'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks again for listening, and until we're together again for the next session of Appraisers on Purpose, create the change that you seek.